jet
I
base.
haven't seen them.
They like to
have seen
have
last
some
Christmas.
reasonable proximity to carriers.
How about the Miami airport?
Well, it might be available.
I haven't seen fact or
Well,
I haven't seen John for
at least a year. Well, probably since last time at the press club.
So
In
still.
fact, I don't know if
the Air Force Base
Pat was there last time, but I think John was.
And the Air Force decided they want the whole lot.
No, they have to have.
But it's a case, but I know that.
Well, again, East Coast.
Sure, this is the jet age.
Linda, can you join me with this? Good afternoon. Good to be with you all again. In case we haven't met, I believe I have met all of you, but in case we haven't met, I'm Gordan England, the Secretary of the Navy, the Acting Deputy Secretary of Defense, and also the Senior Executive for the National Security Personnel System. And today I am wearing my third hat as the Senior Executive of the National Security Personnel System. Before I start, I want to say, first of all, thanks. I'm going to say thanks to all the men and women who serve in our military and who voluntarily defend our nation's liberty and freedom around the world. We owe them and all the generations before them who wore the cloth of our nation our very deepest appreciation. Now today, I'd like to talk about other great Americans, the great Americans who are not in uniform, but who support those who are the war fighters, those behind the lines who support those who are on the front lines, the more than 650,000 invaluable civilians in the Department of Defense. As many of you know, 2 years ago, the Congress gave the DoD the authority to design a new and a vastly better personnel system for all of these civilians for the post-9/11 era, and it's called the National Security Personnel System, NSPS. Now, for the past 18 months, the department has been working very hard to develop this system as a win-win-win. A win for our employees, a win for the department, and a win for our nation. And during these past 18 months, we've met a number of times to talk about the status as we have developed the system. I would remind you that this has been, I believe, an extraordinarily collaborative process. It's involved our employees, managers, unions, elected officials, congressional staff, advisory group, and others. Frankly, whoever could help us has been consulted. We're now at the end of this phase of the design process. Tomorrow, the final NSPS regulations will be available on the DoD website and filed with the Federal Register. The formal notification went to the Congress 2 hours ago, 1 o'clock today. Now, our partner in this design effort has been OPM. Since the very beginning, they have worked closely with us, the Office of Personnel Management, and with me here today is the director of OPM, Linda Springer, who joins with me today in initiating the next phase of NSPS. Now, by law, 1 o'clock today, by law, the Congress has 30 days after today to review the final regulations, after which the labor relations portions of the NSPS will take effect for all employees. The human resources portion, the new pay grades, the pay for performance system, etc., is scheduled to progressively begin in February. Initially, about 60,000 employees will be brought into NSPS at that time, and then more progressively added over time. Now, DoD has made a number of changes to the regulations that were proposed last February. They were called the proposed regulations. We then went into meet and confer periods with our unions. We went into a lot of discussion periods. And Mary Lacey is with us today. Mary Lacey is the NSPS Program Executive Officer, and she is here today to discuss those changes with you and to answer any specific detailed questions you may have. I do want to thank Mary. This has been a very challenging assignment for her, and it's because of her leadership and professionalism that we are where we are today, about to publish the final regulations. So my special thanks to Mary Lacey. I also want to thank George Nesterczuk from OPM, who has also been working with us on a daily basis, and he's also here today to answer any of your questions. Now, at this time, Linda Springer, the director of OPM, would also like to offer a few remarks. I want to thank Linda, and I want to thank the whole team at OPM for partnering with us. This has been a partnership. We're grateful for Linda for her leadership, and we look forward to continuing to work with OPM. They will continue to be our partner as we now go into the final design phase and start implementing the program. So on behalf of all the men and women in DoD, Linda, I thank you, and thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Secretary England, and I want to compliment you and thank you for your leadership, particularly at a very crucial point earlier in the process, and I think that was a turning point in our work, and your steady hand has been very important to us. We thank Secretary Rumsfeld as well, and your entire team, Mary and many others who've been instrumental in really crafting what we believe is a fine set of regulations that will serve the men and women of the department very well now and in the years to come. I also want to add my thanks to George Nesterczuk of OPM for carrying out the principal role of OPM in this process up till now and making sure that OPM's part has been carried out effectively. As you know, OPM has a sort of assurance role assigned to us by the Congress with respect to NSPS. Our role is to make sure that all of the principles, merit systems principles, due process, prohibited practices, prohibitions, veterans preference, all of those, to make sure that all of those are preserved throughout the development of regulations and their implementation. I can tell you today that all of those have been preserved and have been adequately maintained in these regulations that will be released today. OPM will be continuing to be involved through the implementation, as is our role, and we will make sure that not only in the regulation but also in the implementation that those protections still are maintained. I want to comment on DoD's experience in this realm. We have looked at OPM at all of the programs over the years that have been demonstration projects and others that have helped us to get valuable experience as we've crafted regulations and, candidly, the legislation and worked with the Congress. DoD has decades of experience in this area. To date, over 45,000 Department of Defense employees have been covered by demonstration programs, and we've learned lessons from those with respect to occupational banding, pay bandings, occupational groupings, and all of those lessons have helped inform the development of these regulations. I feel very confident that DoD has the knowledge and the experience on which they can build to make this a successful implementation. We're anxious for DoD to succeed. We know they will succeed, and we'll be confident as they proceed, and we'll be participating with them as they execute and implement with the first 60,000 and then beyond. OPM will be there to support that process and to make sure that it's a smooth implementation. Obviously, all of us through the government are watching how this goes. There's a lot at stake, and we will be very involved, but we are very confident of the success of this implementation. So thank you again, Secretary England.
Welcome, Linda and Mary. And George, if you would join us, please. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mary Lacey and George Nesterczuk who are here, and between the four of us, we would be pleased to answer any questions you may have today. Okay, well, Mr. Steve, how about we'll start in the back there? You've been patiently waiting.
Thank you, Mr. England. I'll be the skunk at the party here today.
Okay.
The Department of Homeland Security issued regulations, and a union immediately filed a lawsuit to stop them and has prevailed in the first round in the federal courts. I think it's no surprise that the same thing is going to happen here at Defense. Have you tried to reach out to the unions and and make an effort not to go down the road of litigation and slow down these changes?
Well, I don't know if we'll go down the road of litigation or not. I mean, look, obviously people can file if they feel that's appropriate. On the other hand, we have been reaching out, in my judgment, Steve, for the last 18 months. We've had a lot of meetings with the union officials. Last night we had dinner together. But look, they are independent organizations. Regarding Department of Homeland Security, in my judgment, we have a different program, a different law, and I believe that we have met the spirit and the intent of what the Congress wanted us to do. This is a very balanced program. As Linda Springer said, it provides all the protections. It also provides opportunity. I mean, when I said this is a win-win-win, I believe that is exactly the case. In my judgment, I mean, from day one, NSPS is not an end unto itself. NSPS provides us, the department, the opportunity to provide an environment for our people to excel, to be challenged, and to be rewarded. And that is a very dynamic and satisfying environment for all of our employees. I continue to believe that the vast, vast majority of our people will embrace NSPS because of the opportunities it provides them and the challenges that they will have under NSPS. So, look, if there is a suit filed, obviously it's up to the court system to decide. I would hope that that doesn't happen. I would hope that the employees are given an opportunity quickly to become part of this much, much better personnel system. But obviously, whatever happens, we will deal with and proceed accordingly. Yes, ma'am.
Lolita Baldor with AP, if I can just sort of follow up on that. I mean, clearly one of the problems that the courts had with the Homeland Security system was provisions that would allow senior managers to, what they said, nullify portions of the contract. What is it that you have done with this that addresses some of the legal problems that DHS has had, and how does it differ?
I'll let Mary and perhaps George address the specifics. Well, why don't I let you do it completely rather than me do an overview, George?
The statutory authorities that we have to establish a new labor relations system are different than DHS's, so some of the argumentation will obviously be different. As far as the sanctity of contracts, it is a federal environment, not the private sector, and federal contracts come under different precepts. The fact that agencies have needs that sometimes permit them to pierce provisions of contracts is a kind of an accepted practice in the federal sector. So I think the court will have to take that into consideration. But basically, we do have a different statutory construct with a different authority to create a new labor relations system.
There's a second piece to this answer that's also equally important. We have the ability in the Department of Defense, as part of our regular course of doing business, to issue internal policy, procedures, ways that we are going to do business in the Department of Defense to carry out our assigned mission. Those documents and procedures and policies are called issuances. Leave it to the federal government to design a wonderful term of art, but they are indeed called issuances. If those issuances are implementing NSPS, specifically around NSPS, they can override the provisions of existing collective bargaining agreements out there in the 1,550 different units. That was a big concern of the union, our union partners, as well as some of our managers. We have assured in the final regulations that the ability to put out an implementing issuance that overrides a collective bargaining agreement is restricted to the very highest levels in the Department of Defense. The Secretary of Defense, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, the Undersecretaries of Defense, and in the components, in the Army, Navy, and Air Force, it is limited to the Secretary of the Service only. So we believe that also provides significant protection for the situation that you raised. Yes, ma'am.
Vicki O'Hara from NPR. Do you anticipate having to renegotiate a significant portions of contracts, significant numbers of contracts?
There's not a single answer to that question because the contracts vary across the Department of Defense in terms of their detail and their coverage. Every contract will have to be looked at, and there will be provisions in some of the existing contracts that will be nullified by the new regulation. There's others that will not, and there'll be situations where it'll be in the best interest of the unions as well as management to reopen those contracts for some negotiation to fix the holes that might have been pierced in it as a result of the new regulation.
Do you know what that might cost, renegotiating all those contracts?
We renegotiate contracts all the time. We have 1,550 bargaining units. We reopen them all the time as a normal course of doing business as procedures and policies change. So.
Eric Yoder from the Post. The draft regulations were characterized, at least on the union side, as effectively replacing collective bargaining with quote-unquote collaboration. And I'm wondering, is that a fair characterization of it? And if you are still bargaining, what areas are you saying that you will no longer bargain over?
It's not a fair characterization because there is still collective bargaining. There is an added dimension to that in the continuing collaboration that anticipates a new role for the unions that they haven't played in the past, and that is to look at policies and issues before they're issued, before they're final, get their views into consideration before they're issued, and that's the continuing collaboration process. That will allow them input into areas that they hadn't been involved in the past. So that's an upside to the relationship. As far as where we've narrowed the scope of bargaining, it's over operational issues, procedures that would implement operational decisions within the department. It's in those areas. But there's still collective bargaining, very much so.
Wendy Wayne with Talk Radio News Service. The Air Force Promotion Board has taken into account.
I'm sorry, I missed the first. The what?
The Air Force Promotion Board, excuse me, I have a cold, is taking into account break in service when promoting officers. And given the number of recalls after 9/11, this is particularly disturbing because many of these recalls are returning to active duty as a display of patriotism, and they're being penalized because of their break in service. Is there any move to look into this, to address this?
Well, NSPS does not deal with the military side, so NSPS is only a civilian system.
But from the DoD point of view, will the DoD look into this?
I'd rather address NSPS today. The topic today is NSPS. If you have a subject on NSPS, I'd be happy to address it. That's not the topic of the day, but thank you.
Sir, I guess the devil is in the details. This is October. There's a month before this comes into play, and you're talking about February '06 to start it up and to implement all of this for 60,000 people. Are the human resources people set to do it that quickly?
Let me make a comment. Originally, if you go back to the original program, it was going to implement of October of last year. And we said we would not be driven by the schedule. We would only proceed when we were ready to proceed. So we have proceeded on a very deliberate path. We made sure that we accomplished every phase before we moved to the next phase. And we've kept that. I mean, that has been our mantra, and that is the way we are still proceeding. So we have people have been in training. We have people in training today. We are proceeding along that path. If we reach a point where we're not ready to proceed because just we run into difficulties, we will slow down the program. So this is not a schedule-driven program. This is event-driven. That is, when we're ready for the next event, we'll proceed. But we have been very deliberate in this process. We are ready to proceed. People are well trained. So in 30 days, we'll be ready to stand up the labor relations. Again, we're not going to, the labor relations, we won't stand up the human resources, though, until February. And when we stand up the human resources in February, we will go through a 6-month, what we call mock period. That is, at the end of 6 months, we will evaluate. We will act as if this was for real. but it will be a mock exercise in terms of the results so that we can learn. So next year is first and foremost a learning process, and no one will actually be in the system in terms of actual pay, real evaluations, until January of the following year. So not this January year. So we have all of next year to implement the system before it really counts. And we will then progressively put people in and each time learn from those experiences and improve the system. So my judgment is that, again, it's very deliberate, it's well planned, and it will be well executed. And if we have problems, we'll stop and adjust at that time. We want the system to work right for everyone.
It's not just the human resource folks, though, that need to be trained and need to be ready. This is not just a human resource system. This is part of a business management system for the entire Department of Defense. It also involves the training of line managers who are actually going to operate the system and have an increased role in the system than they've had in the past in making determinations and decisions, as well as every employee. So there is training for all of those stakeholders in the process.
Mr. Secretary, could you talk a little bit about how the system is going to be phased in? Is it going to be a geographic phase in? Are you phasing it in by levels of employment?
There's a couple dimensions to the phasing. First phase will be what are now general schedule, general management, the GS, GM, and acquisition demo employees. We will phase them in what's called Spiral 1. That has 3 pieces to it. The first group is about 60,000 next February. Next group is about 48,000 in the March-April timeframe, and the third group is probably next September, October is another 120,000. Spiral 2 will be additional career groups, work groups, our blue-collar workforce, some of the other specialty systems that we operate within the department, very important specialty system, such as the National Guard, civilian employees, and things like that. That'll be called Spiral 2. They won't start until at least a year and a half, 2 years from now. Now, within those categories of employees, we are deploying NSPS through the chain of command, and each of the services and components has a slightly different way that they're approaching it. Some of them are doing it starting at the very highest echelons in their organization for the first group and then adding the lower level command units. Others are doing it by base. So we've left that choice to the chain of command, what works best for them from a management and leadership point of view.
Sort of follow up on that. How many employees total will be covered by the system? I've heard 750, 700, 650. What's the best number?
There's approximately 650,000 that are coverable, which is not to say that they will all be covered instantaneously. There are a number of employee groups that cannot be brought into NSPS because they exist outside of Title V. And there's others where they can be partly brought into NSPS because while they exist under Title V, they may have restrictions on them that exist in other places, such as the National Guard is a good example where they exist under Title V, but they also exist under Title 32. So the adverse actions will not apply to them because that's restricted to the state adjunct generals. So we're looking at up to 650,000 to be in the system by 2008 under the human resources.
Out of 750,000?
750,000 plus or minus. That fluctuates quite a bit in the department.
Thank you.
Julie Davidson from LRP. Can you explain the role of the FLRA and MSPB that they'll have under the new system?
FLRA will play a review. Federal Labor Relations Authority will play a review role. We're creating a National Security Labor Relations Board that'll adjudicate labor disputes for the department, and their decisions would be reviewable by FLRA, and then subsequently judicial review would be applicable. In the case of MSPB, they too have an appeal role. Merit Systems Protection Board. We are utilizing the administrative law judges of the MSPB to adjudicate employee appeals. The department will subsequently perform a review of those decisions, and then employees will get to appeal the decisions of that process to the MSPB and subsequently to the courts.
Lisa Trzynski with LRP. What do you estimate the cost of implementation to be?
Well, let me address it. I'm not sure there's a defined number for this because our training, we're constantly training our people. And we train both our civilians and our military people all the time. As a matter of fact, what gives me confidence about this system is that the core competency of the Department of Defense is training. And training is vitally important for this program to work correctly. So we will do this within our existing training budgets. We train, so we will train our people within our budgets. We have allocated special monies for the program office, for the top level management, but the training budgets will be part of our normal training budgets that we have throughout the Department of Defense.
What about the
Last one, maybe?
What about the systems and all that?
Pardon me?
What about the new systems or?
We have modified our IT systems, so we've been doing that for the last 18 months, and we have all those systems now in place.
The Defense Department has been unable to acquire a provisional certification from OPM for its senior executives appraisal system. And I'm wondering, what confidence will employees have that the department will be able to do this for $650,000?
Well, we will get certification. We haven't. We sort of ran out of time with that timeline, but that's still in process, and so we will get certification. I don't think that's a real issue. It was sent back for us to provide some additional information. I'll be happy to have Linda make it, because the OPM certifies us in this regard. So they've asked for additional information. That certification period ran out, but we're in the process of doing that, and we will indeed get certified. Linda, you want to add to that?
Yeah, just to say that you're aware that there's a provisional certification that comes first, and we did ask for a little more information, but it was just because of where the timeline was, and it had to sort of restart again for the next year. So we're in the process of reviewing that. We think it's well underway.
Probably time for one more question.
As I understood it, when this system first came into being, one of the things that Secretary Rumsfeld wanted to accomplish was to make it easier to move employees around from job to job, to hire people when you needed to. There was a complaint that too many uniformed people were having to be put into jobs because you couldn't get a civilian into them fast enough, and uniformed people were doing things really that had nothing to do with trigger pulling or what we normally expect uniforms to do. Is there a number that you hope by the end of this, when this system is finally implemented, that a number of uniformed people who are now doing quote-unquote civilian jobs who will be pulled out of those jobs and civilians will actually be in them?
There's not a number. I will tell you there's a continuing process in this regard. So we have already been converting military to civilian. That is, jobs where it was convenient in the past to have a military person do that job. It was not really a military job. So we have already been in the process of doing that, and that will continue. Again, my judgment again is that one of the benefits of this program, we will actually increase in some areas at least the civilian workforce, because we will be, if we can convert military jobs to civilian jobs, we effectively increase the effective size of the military. Right? We increase our military effective size if we get the military doing military jobs and then replace the jobs we were doing with civilians. And we are about that. That's a very important attribute for the Department of Defense, is to continue that transition. So there's not a number. It's a continuous process. And we'll just keep doing that until we have the right balance.
Is there a number that you've done to date?
There is, but we'll have to follow up. I'll be pleased to provide you a number. I just don't have the exact number, but we will get you the exact number, because we do have. I just don't want to give something I'm not sure of. But we'll provide you that. I thank you. Thanks very much. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you today, and thank you all for being here today. Thanks very much.